a lot of talking over the years, and I just decided recently that I was so much less interested in doing PowerPoint. I'm over PowerPoint. I don't know about you, but it's a little boring. And I'm also really interested in speaking into what you would like to hear. So I don't have a pat talk that I'm going to give you, but I can speak on a wide variety of subjects, some of which I wrote up here, and I want to get a sense of what you want to hear about. And I'm also interested in you being a part of this, not just lecturing at you, but responding to the questions that you have, because what I'm interested in is that you get something useful from today, and I don't know what that is, so you'll have to let me know. So I am a family practice doc, traditionally trained, and then I've done a ton of training in what we call integrative medicine, which I'm excited to say in 2014 will be an official medical specialty. Yay! What that means is that you can see a cardiologist, you can see a pulmonologist, you can see a gastroenterologist, and you can see an integrative medicine physician who is fellowship trained as a regular doctor and is paid for by your insurance. So this is fantastic. We've been fighting for it for a long time. I'm on the board of the organization doing that. And what that means is it's a Western medicine doctor who knows a lot about preventative medicine. Everything you're talking about in the challenge. Knows a lot about exercise and movement, knows a lot about nutrition and how absolutely essential it is, knows a lot about herbal medicine, knows a lot about Chinese medicine, knows a lot about Ayurvedic medicine. Not that I'm a specialist in that. Like if you need acupuncture, I'd send you to Lita. If you need chiropractic, I would send you to Michelle. But I know what those fields do. I know what they encompass. I know what they're good for. I know what they're really useful for, and that's really helpful. And I work hand in hand in Santa Cruz with lots of other allied health folks. So in all over town. In my own practice, we have chiropractic, acupuncture, integrative psychiatry, we have a psychologist, we have a massage therapist, we have a nutritionist, we have a naturopathic doctor, and most of us have worked really hand in hand together for about 5 years. So it's a very integrated experience. We see people from a whole variety of lenses. For example, we had someone come in last week who is a young person with a lot of trauma who was seeing our psychologist, then saw me, and we were able to get her off some medications and really help her sleep at night, but she was still having chronic pain, so she saw the acupuncturist who really helped her with that, and then had an injury and she saw the chiropractor, and all of us get together with her permission to talk about her and care for her as well as possible. So that's what it's like to be a patient at our center. So in my journey of being a doc, and I've been a doc for a long time now, about 22 years, the other thing, one of the many, many things I did was write books. And these books, I didn't really set out to be a sex doctor, and I'm really not a sex doctor. I do lots of things. But along the way, I did work on books on Taoism and sexuality. And the reason is that I personally got introduced to those practices as a very young person, about age 20. And it was so profoundly amazing that both my husband and I thought, my God, this needs to be shared with the world in a way that people can hear it. So about 20 years ago, we wrote a book called, with the catchy title, The Multi-Orgasmic Man. That was the 2-cell title. But the book is really about holistic sexuality. It's about how sexuality, your health and well-being, and spirituality are really like this. And if you really want to have a profound experience of pleasure, not just bodily pleasure, but real spiritual, extended, connecting with the universe pleasure, and with a partner if you wish, that this is a way to do it. So it's a pretty amazing practice. So there are a lot of things we could talk about today. So I've got 3 books on Taoism and sexuality, one for women, one for couples, and one for men. I've got 2 books coming out this year that I'm writing with the Gottmans, who may or may not be familiar with, but they're the foremost couples researchers in the world. They're incredible. They're up at the University of Washington. And one of them is called The Man's Guide to Women. Very important book. And the other one is called 10 Dates to a Lifetime of Love. And what I'm really after is how can I share what I've learned along the way about having a long-term relationship. I've been with my husband for 25 years. I've got 3 kids. They're 19, 14, 14. And anybody who's been married more than 10 years in the room? All right. Does this take work? Yes, right? It takes a lot of commitment, and it takes a lot of continued growth, and a lot but it's doable. It's absolutely doable. So we're trying to share, what do we really know about that process? Because there's a lot of preconceptions about what it has to look like, and it's not necessarily so, but there are certain things that are essential. So I could speak on any of those topics. So here are some things that I thought about, since sexuality was the name of today's talk. So there's spirituality and sexuality, including Taoist sexuality, but other questions too, and its relationship to Tantra, if you've ever heard of that. Relationship and intimacy. And its relationship to health. I spend quite a bit of time talking about how much love, relationship, and affection has an enormous impact on your health. You know, some people leave my office with a prescription for finding a group of people to hang out with, like this, for example, or really trying to find, you know, getting massage, or a better way to find a romantic partner. Because honestly, if I can help people have intimacy, I will have their cardiovascular risk. Okay, it's more important than if I reduce their cholesterol. It's more important than whether I control their blood pressure, though obviously I'd like to do that too. Health and sexuality, so impact of sex itself on your health and well-being. Libido and sex drive. Oh, where is my libido gone? This is a common issue for lots of people. Most common issue in this whole country for women. Sex and getting older, happy to talk about that too. So let me see a show of hands. Let's say you can vote on 2. Who wants to hear about spirituality and sexuality? Okay. One more time. We do not have premature hand raisers here. Okay. Okay. Relationship and intimacy. Okay. A little bigger. Health and sexuality. Good. Libido and sex drive. A lot of takers on that one. No surprise. Sex and getting older. Okay. So what I'm seeing is top here is relationship, libido, and sex and getting older. So I'm going to hit those 3 more strongly, and please ask me questions as we go here, okay? Let's start out talking a little bit about relationship and intimacy. This is really kind of difficult. It's a controversial topic, I think, especially in Santa Cruz. So I think I would start out by saying, well, here's the one tip that I have learned from my research with the Gottmans, because surprisingly, relationship has actually been very well investigated. I never knew that, that they have actually looked at what works. And I always thought, okay, if you fight a lot, that's not good. If you don't fight, that's good. Well, that's bullshit. That's just not true, you know? People who fight a lot, people who don't fight, it doesn't matter. Same rates of staying married, getting divorced, staying together. So the first thing I want to say is that they have done research on the effect of getting married, which, I mean, I come at this from a completely unbiased point of view. I don't think people have to get married, or, you know, it doesn't matter to me. There's no moral judgment about any of this, but I think it's interesting. And there are plenty of people that don't ever want to get married, and that's completely fine too. While we're talking about that a little bit, I don't know if you guys are aware of the research on monogamy. Has anyone heard about the ground squirrels research? No. Okay. So this is really fascinating. So they looked at there was a species of ground squirrel that were lifetime monogamous. Right? There are animals like that, right? And then there's a very similar species of ground squirrel that are completely not. They're polygamous, whatever. They're having sex with everybody. And they're quite happy about that. So, and they were thinking, what's so weird? I mean, it's a very similar species. They're in 2 different locations. How can the behavior be, such a basic behavior, be so different? And so they found a particular gene in them that differentiates monogamy from non-monogamy. Isn't it interesting? I thought it was fascinating. Not only that, but that gene sequence is actually present on the human genome. So then they started looking at that, and it actually turns out that there are certain people that are genetically predisposed to be non-monogamous. Doesn't that explain a few things? Hello? Did we know that? We knew that. Okay. And there are certain people that are genetically predisposed to be monogamous. This is useful information, you know? I mean, one thing I would say is you should have a sense of who you are. like it's not good or bad. It's just fine. But you want to know who you are. And trying to be one thing when you're the other, it's like trying to be heterosexual when you're really homosexual. You know, it's really not fair to yourself. Right? So you want to get a sense of who you are and be honest with yourself and what you really want. And then when you're looking around, you want to get a sense of like, who's this other person that I'm with? You know, what does their history look like? What does it feel like to be with them? Because if you're someone who really wants lifetime monogamy, you really don't want to pick the person who doesn't want that. Right? There's nothing wrong with either path. You just want to be clear. So I thought that study was fascinating. Fascinating, very interesting. So there's that. There's the what do I want and who do I pick? And then the other thing I found out about relationship and marriage, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so a lot of studies done on living together, couples living together versus couples who get married, both gay and lesbian couples and heterosexual couples. And there was a profound impact of getting married. And in those gay and lesbian couples who were in states where they couldn't actually get married, they measured it as, do you feel that you're married? You know, do you have the intention that you're married? And just having that intention had a huge impact on whether they stayed together or not. I think something like a 30 or 40% impact on whether that couple stayed together. So it looks like doing something, and that doesn't mean, you know, I went to the courthouse or I was in the Catholic Church or, you know, it doesn't even have to be that formal, but having a publicly recognized, personally agreed upon, we are going to be there for life, meant that people stayed together much more predictably. And again, I'm not someone who thinks everyone should get married. I really don't. But it's good to think, you know, like if that's what you want, you know, this is what I think. I'm always seeing these couples where somebody wants to get married and the other one's not sure, right? And that's fair. But 7 years later, you know, you wouldn't think about that, right? Like, what do you really want? And who are you with? And what do they want? And what's really going to happen here? So marriage does seem to help with lifelong staying together, if that's what you want. Again, I have no judgment about it. And then in Santa Cruz, I get all these questions about polyamory. And the Gottmans that I'm doing these books with on relationship are hilarious. They're very funny. They're very smart. He's probably 74 and about this tall and wears a kippah and has a white beard, and you know, but he's constantly swearing, and so he's hilarious. And he was dying to find research on polyamory. So since I saw him last, he had scoured the internet, gone through all the academic blogs. He found one book on polyamory, and unfortunately, it wasn't research; it was just stories. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I forget that not everyone lives in the weird world I live in. Okay. This is the modern day equivalent to open marriage in a way. This is, so, you know, we knew this more as, you know, basically, it can look like a lot of things. Sometimes it looks like I'm a single person with lots of people with whom I have relationships, and sometimes it looks like we're a couple, but each of us has emotional and sexual relationships with other people, right? So in Santa Cruz, it's a little more common than it is other places, though in every city in the United States right now, definitely interest in this. So I was really interested in it too, because I know a lot of people exploring polyamory. And again, it's this question, well, what do you do with people who are not monogamous by nature? You know, how do you negotiate that in a way that's, you know, just because you're non-monogamous doesn't mean you're not integrous and honest and a good person, right? So how do you negotiate that in a way that feels respectful? So that, I think, is what the polyamorous community is trying to do. How do we have relationships with multiple people with good communication, et cetera, et cetera? So what we were interested in the book was, how does it work practically? You know, not so much any judgment about it, but how does it work? And again, we don't have real research, but from the stories from that particular book, from the people that I know, both personally and in my practice, and I also had a really great discussion last night with someone who worked as a sex therapist on a sex line in San Francisco for about a decade, and her feeling was my feeling, which was no judgment, but what a lot of work. Wow, what a lot of communication. Oh my God, you know, really? She was describing 5 people in a polyamorous relationship, and they had to meet every night of the week, you know, for an hour or two to discuss their feelings about what was going on. Because if you're going to have that kind of integrity, it's really a lot of work to have it with one person. And if you have it with 2, wow, that's like 2 times 2. It's not like twice as much, it's like 4 times as much. Which is what the guy on, what's the television show about the Mormon families? Anybody? Sister Wives. Sister Wives. Just in case y'all didn't know, there's a reality TV show about a Mormon family that has 4 wives, and the guy in it says it's not twice as much work. It's like, you know, multiply it. It's like 8 times as much work. So it's a lot of communication. So that's my only thought about that. And not a very stable configuration, just because really who has that kind of time to do that much emotional work? So I think it's fine. I think people should explore what's fun for them. And, you know, I get lots of people asking me what works long term. Yes?
Does that include, are you talking about a relationship, or you're talking about people who just sleep with other people outside?
Or that have a relationship. Good question. So the question was, am I talking about people who just hook up a lot?
Yes.
That's the modern word, by the way. Translation for the over, 30 crowd would be us, right? Hooking up is, what did we used to call it? Sleeping around, or sometimes even dating, because you can hook up. I have teenagers, so I'm really trying to get the lowdown on all this, but you can hook up multiple times with the same person, which means that you don't necessarily have a long-term emotional relationship, but you have some agreement with each other. We used to call that dating. Dating, or seeing each other. Anyway, it's somewhere in there. It's a little bit different, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who have intentional relationships. Right. Well, you can imagine there's every take on this. I know a very solid polyamorous configuration right now, 3 or 4 people, and it's been very solid for a long time. There's different things work for different people. I'm not opposed to anything that's consensual and works for people. If you're interested in being with one person, so I said marriage helps. The other thing that appears to be enormously important is having positive experiences with somebody. Lita, can you come up here? So what I mean, or not, she's chewing, that's really unfair. Sorry, honey. What I mean are, like, let's say Lita and I are together, and let's say Lita's like doing the dishes, right? And sorry, Michelle. I'm Michelle, right? And I come by and I go like this, right? Okay, that's one. That's positive, right? And let's say I do that, and Lita goes like this. Okay, well, that's a negative. That's me putting in a positive bid, and Lita going, up yours, right? But let's say I come by and I brush Lita, and she kind of leans into me, right? Okay, well, that's positive met, right? So that's small, that we are giving unconscious communication all the time to our partners, and more than what you say. Not that what you say isn't important. Having a filter is very important to being in a relationship. But that these little, like how your face looks when I look at you, how your body language is toward me, that this has an enormous impact. And the reason is that we as human animals are making an assessment all the time of, is this person on my side or not on my side? Is she my friend or is she my enemy? Is she safe or is she unsafe? Microseconds. You're not thinking about this stuff. It's in your unconscious. And it happens very quickly all the time. So on one day, she might not feel safe to me because we got in an argument. And I can see on her face that she's turned away and she's rejecting my advances. And my little joke got rejected. And do you know what I mean? So everyone gets into conflict. I'm not saying avoiding conflict and negativity is the idea of relationship. That would be impossible. But that if you can have a ratio of those positive little interactions of 20 to 1, you're good. Literally. Thank you so much. Yes?
I have some of my girlfriends were talking about conscious uncoupling, and this came out when Gwyneth Paltrow and her guy broke up. And
did she call it conscious uncoupling?
Yeah, and apparently it's based on some research from someone in LA, and I'm just curious if you know about it, and I only heard the highlights, but this researcher was talking about that.
Can you all hear her? Okay.
The genetic monogamy thing kind of came around when we got married at 16 and died at 30 or 40, and
Right.
now we're living so much longer. So does that monogamy for a marriage of 40, 50, or 60 years still work in this modern time? So I'm just curious if you have any
Thoughts about that?
research or thoughts on that. It was very intriguing.
I don't know who that specific person is, but I just, as a scientist, not as an emotional sort of person in relationship, but as a scientist, I think that having one person meet all of the needs we're talking about in marriage for 60 years is really a lot to expect. I think it's a lot. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think that's a long road to hoe. I also think there's a lot of, agricultural metaphors. I also think that there's nothing wrong with serial monogamy for many people, and it gets complicated when you have family and children, but there's a lot of couples that do child rearing really well, and then the kids leave and they're like, really? It just doesn't work, that, and then they go on and they have other partners. I think there's lots of right ways to do this thing. There's no, the fairy tale Walt Disney idea that you're going to meet someone when you're a young, strapping 18-year-old and you're going to be together until you die, that's a little bit. Also, people do better when they're older, when they meet when they're a little older than that. You don't do so well meeting it or getting married at 18. Okay. We talked about marriage. We talked about positive to negative ratio. Okay, here's the other clincher. When they looked at couples, I think this is fascinating. They looked at newly married couples a month after they got married, and they taped them interacting for 5 minutes. And they could predict with 95% accuracy whether they'd be married in 10 years based on that interaction. And the reason is the way we do anything is kind of the way we do everything. And it's all about, am I respectful in my interaction or am I dismissive? Am I cold or am I, entertaining? And it has a lot to do with having with really seeing your partner as the person that they can be, rather than picking apart the things that don't work about who they are. Does that make sense to you? So, for example, research shows that people who are optimistic and happy have a less realistic view of the world than people who are pessimistic and unhappy. I just think that we create our realities to such a huge degree, and this is true in relationship as well. So that there's something about having a, charming kind of, oh, isn't that cute? About your partner when they, I don't know, do something really stupid, right? Rather than, oh my God, you're such an idiot, like that face and that tone, that's what doesn't work in marriage, right? That it's these little things, it's these tiny little communications we make with our bodies and our faces and the tone of our voices all the time that communicate, I care about you. When you screw up, I'm going to be there for you. I find you wonderful even in your distress. That's what makes relationship work. And it doesn't have really a lot to do with anything else. It doesn't necessarily have to do with money or with fighting or not fighting or all these other things that we think are really important. It has to do with this basic, intimate interaction with one another. And the way you interact around doing the dishes is just as important as how you interact around profound conversations. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Questions about relationship and intimacy? Yes, ma'am.
Are there any statistics about long-distance relationships versus in-person relationships? Any studies around that?
Great question. There are. And I remember talking about it. I don't know them well, so I'm paraphrasing, which is some people do really well in long-distance relationships as long as there's enough intimacy in between. So the long distance, you're in Iraq for 2 years and I see you for a week here and a week there, that doesn't work so well. But we spend a month together, or we have, we have stretches. You have to be together long enough that you don't have the honeymoon complex, right? It's easy in long-distance relationship to set up a romantic weekend and be on your best behavior for 3 days. Then not so much, when you're together in the everyday. So as long as there's stretches of time to build enough trust and intimacy, you do well. Speaking of which, guess what the number one needed emotion is for relationship?
Acceptance.
Empathy.
Those are all really important. Really important, but it's trust, which is a little bit of everything that you said. It's basic trust. You know, I trust that you're on my side. And I think that that's difficult to develop long distance unless you have enough pieces of time together. Does that make sense? Because this good behavior, we know people are on their good behavior, right? We want to know what happens when the shit hits the fan, right? And that's how you develop your relationship muscles, is by using them, right? Yeah.
Any research on people who are established, like, for example, it could be a personal situation, but together 10 years and then it becomes a very long-distance relationship?
Yeah, as long as it's solid. So there are lots of challenges in relationship, right? Like, I'm a physician. People who are married and then do medical residency, really high divorce rate. No surprise there. It's like a long-distance relationship. People who have a child with a disability, high divorce rate. People who have a lot of distance, there can be a higher divorce rate. But what I think is that those situations that stress you, it depends on how you address it. So like anything, a drug-addicted child, or how about a terminally ill child, or how about, all the really difficult things that we can struggle with, they push us into our max, and how you behave there is what determines the success of your relationship. So I think lots of people do really well, especially 10 years in, because by then you've built enough foundational trust that you have an avenue of communication. So I think it's entirely possible. And it depends on the person, People have different needs for intimacy than other people. This is one thing that makes relationship more difficult. If you have somebody who's I need to be touched and cuddled and reassured and talked to, and I need flowers, and I need, I just need more physical touch and feedback from you, which is a fine way of being. As is the way of being, which is, look, I'm really independent, I'm just fine, and gosh, when you're there, it's really fun. I love to have conversations and do things together, but I don't need much from you, right? That's okay too. They're both fine, but having those people married, that's the hard part, right? So I can imagine in a situation where there's a high need for intimacy and there's a lot of physical separation, that might be challenging for people. Any other questions about that? Such an exciting topic. You're all like dying in your seats. Yes.
I have a follow-up about the trust. Like, what are, in your view, sort of the top 3 ways to most helpfully develop trust in a relationship?
Great question. So you can't have trust without vulnerability. It's absolutely necessary. So one thing that I would say with certainty is that if you're someone who is constantly holding back and waiting for the other person to be vulnerable, you're not going to get there. And what I've learned about relationship, because you will be pushed to your edge and you will go, what am I doing with this person? Why did I do this in the first place? You can count on it. If you're going to be in a relationship more than a year or so, that's going to happen. And those are the moments when it's time to get vulnerable and go, well, I'm really scared. I'm really afraid you're going to leave me because what you just saw was so ugly that you can't stand me right now. And I'm really afraid you're going to walk out the door. Rather than going, you're such a judgmental asshole, right? So the moments that you can be vulnerable, because then it allows your partner to go, oh God, I'm not even thinking about that. Of course I'm not going to do that. I'm a little surprised. I'm not sure what to do, but I really want to be with you, right? Boom, now we built trust. As opposed to, I'm afraid you're going to reject me. I'm going to criticize and push you back. Oh, now I feel criticized and pushed back, and this person's not looking so attractive, and you know what I mean? That builds non-trust. So vulnerability, and for the record, you can get hurt being vulnerable emotionally, no doubt about it. Not saying you can't, but you can't get injured in an irreparable way. So my recommendation is, as long as you are physically safe, as long as this relationship is not a destructive relationship, that choosing personally to be vulnerable with your partner is usually a good choice. Because what are they going to do? They might reject you. They might, they might reject you, but they might just step up to the plate and wow, what might happen then? You might have a whole new, deeper level of intimacy together. Or they won't, and you'll find somebody else. Good to know, right? Okay. Should we talk about sex? Okay. On to the good stuff. All right. So, but this is big because I really think that there's nothing wrong with hooking up. If you're in agreement, you guys are, it's fine with the other person. It's fun for both of you. Nothing wrong with that. And because I work with a lot of women around sexuality, I will say for some women, not all women, but for many women, it's harder to have a really good sexual experience unless there's connection. It's hard to have a really good sexual experience, and it's impossible if you don't feel safe. We'll start there, but it's difficult if there isn't some degree of intimacy, right? And intimacy is connection. So, the whole little talk we just had, you can have, even with a hookup, even with somebody you just met, you can have like all these micro communications of trust before you're with them, or not, right? But for most women, in the Taoist tradition, we like to say, before the heart has to be open before the legs are open. And in Taoist sexuality, just like in fact, do we have those charts up there? The whole body is represented on the ear. You see it over here on this acupuncture chart, right? Oh, and there's one up here. Thank you. So the whole body is represented on the ear. It's also represented on various other parts of the body, like the foot, right, which is where acupressure, massage comes from. Well, it's also represented on the genitalia. This is a very Chinese thing. And on the face, for that matter. So on the genitalia, the heart, which is one of the major meridians, is the opening to the vagina in a female. And literally, the heart has to be open before this heart can be open. And I'm not saying you have to have, 10 hours of deep conversation, but there needs to be a degree of trust and openness before there can be intimacy. Otherwise, it's very hard for women to be aroused enough to really enjoy sex.
Can I ask one quick question since we're kind of skipping over the health and sexuality part?
Yeah.
Since going over the just hooking up, have the studies shown that there's the same health benefits, the same really great health benefits if people are just hooking up, even dating maybe multiple times, but not in a committed relationship, but are dating and sleeping with? Great question. So the question was about, are they the same? She knows that there are actually pretty impressive statistics about how good sex is for your health. No doubt about it. People get sick less often, and they live longer when they have more sex. Very clear. We know that's true in relationship, but it's also true not in relationship. So it has something to do, when you have sex, you get this giant surge of healthy hormones. You get oxytocin and prolactin, which are these calming hormones. So you guys are going to talk about meditation. This is sort of the meditative part of sexuality, which is that it calms down your adrenal system and your alarm system, your sympathetic nervous system, and has this very sweet grounding effect on your body. And then it also gives you all these fun hormones. So it gives you PEA, which is the romance hormone. It makes you happy and not very intellectually intelligent, but really happy. And also estrogen and testosterone and all these other things that make people feel good. And it's not just feeling good in the moment of sex, but afterwards too. So it does confer a lot of health benefits. And that would be not just in committed relationship, but if you're in committed relationship, you get the added whammy of all the intimacy benefits to health, which are also enormous. I mean, we're human animals. We're really created, to touch each other and be with each other. And you can get a lot of those benefits just from cuddling and touching. I have a couple in my practice who are 82 and 76, very much in love, very sweet couple, and they massage each other, they touch each other, they're not having intercourse, they don't really care. They've got a very sweet, intimate life, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's great. I have another couple where she's 80 and he's 74, and they have sex 3 times a day. And we had to get him a hip replacement because it was impairing his ability to be in particular positions he wanted to be in, and it worked great. So there's holistic medicine right there. Everything. That's awesome.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
I there sort of studies that showed after a couple of years, those certain hormones aren't there as strong?
Yes.
With somebody for longer?
So when you're first with somebody, yes, Michelle.
Can you just repeat? I didn't hear.
Yep. So the question was, when you're with somebody long term, that there's maybe a decrease in those helpful hormones. There's a decrease in some and not in others. So you still get prolactin and oxytocin, which are really important for long-term wellness, which are calming, centered, I feel comfortable, I feel safe hormones. You still get estrogen and testosterone, which are great for your brain and memory. Some of the stuff that gets less is PEA, that's the romance hormone. That's really high in the early phase of relationship. We call that limerence, or that romance phase. And it's really fun hormone. It's also in chocolate, by the way. No big surprise there. But it impairs your ability to think. So, the other thing I would say is, nature just really wants you to reproduce, right? Nature's after, yeah, go for it. You're having sex with that person, go, yes, more, right? That may not be in your best interest, but that phase is very powerful. You know what that's like. You fall in love, oh my God, it's the most wonderful person I've ever met. And it's this crazy sort of rush of feel-good hormones that cloud your thinking as well, because you don't see stuff that you should see right off the bat. So the other little tip I would say is you may want to, not jump right into bed with people, because you end up with all this physical connection, all this physiologic connection that you may not want or may not work for you. Where were we? We were talking about sex. Thank you. Okay. Let's talk about libido and sex drive. So in the U.S., number one complaint for women, 50% of women in the U.S., decreased libido. Less of a complaint for men, but men in my practice, in my opinion, are very different from women when they're in their teens and 20s and their early 30s, because sex drive is not a choice like maybe they wish it was. What a pain in the butt. You're in math class and you're getting erections and it's really inconvenient. That it's quick, that it's not necessarily intelligent in the sense of like what you're looking at, thinking about, but it's at hand, which is cool. It's got its own benefits, right? And then men, as they get older, I talk about it as the development of the wisdom of the penis. Right? So I get all these guys in their 40s coming to see me going, oh my God, I'm having erectile issues. And I go, okay, tell me the story, what's really going on? And it's usually, I'm trying to have sex with someone I don't like. Or I'm trying to have sex with someone I don't trust anymore. Or I'm trying to have sex and I'm not sure about this partner. And I go, oh, well, that's not an erection issue. That's the wisdom of your penis, right? That's your body saying no when your brain is saying yes, right? And that's not a problem. That's being more female in your sexuality, which is you need some sense of connection and rightness before you can get it on with this person. And I think that's a good thing, right? It makes it better for you, at least. Women are different. It's the complex web, right? Women are just female. I'm not saying women can't have very substantial sex drive and be very assertive around their sexual needs, because absolutely they can. I'm not saying that's not true, but in general, women need a more context to have a good sexual experience. It's not that she can't. Women can have sex when they don't want to. Does happen, but they're not going to necessarily be orgasmic and have a really good experience or be lubricated, and that's a problem. And one of the things I teach is that when you do that, you really impair your ability to have pleasure, because you teach your body to be sexual and feel nothing or feel pain. And when you do that, it's really kind of significant self-deception. And I don't want to get a lot into trauma today, but I will just tell you I see a lot of women who've had trauma in my practice. And that has to be, carefully unwound for women to be fully sexually alive. And it's completely possible. The good news is it can be done. And I've seen it over and over again. So in incredibly difficult situations. So lots of hope to be had. And you never want to have sex when you don't want to. It's true for men too, because it teaches your body to do something kind of on automatic pilot and not be fully present. And it's not good for you because now you're dulling your nerve endings rather than awakening them, right? We want you to have sex in a situation where your whole body's like, yes, I'm one big yes. Because then you've got good blood flow, you've got the nerves activated, you've got lubrication for women, you've got erection for men, and everything works better. And it's way more fun, and it's a lot more likely to be successful. And this applies no matter who you're having sex with. Women with women, men with men, transgender with transgender, you know, whoever. Same thing. What else do I want to say about this? Okay, so libido. So for women, I always say for a woman to want to have sex, she has to be rested. Most women don't do well when they're chronically sleep deprived and stressed out, like in acupuncture schools. Anybody here at 5 Branches? Rested, connected, and again, it doesn't have to be a 10-hour deep conversation, but some sense of connection with who you're with, no matter who they are. Rested, connected, and relieved of duties. So the woman who's making lists in her head while trying to have sex, it's not going to work. Totally not going to work. And the reason, and that's why guys, you know, make lists in their head when they're trying not to ejaculate, right? Because it takes them out of their body, you know, keeps them from, you know, fully feeling their pleasure. So for women, you know, those 3 things are really essential. And most of the women that I see with low libido have either had some kind of trauma, where they've distanced themselves from their genitals or their physical experience. Can be dealt with. Not going to talk about that now, but there's lots of hope to be had. They're overtired and overworked, and they give too damn much. Anybody like that in the room? Yeah. Right? And they're not connected necessarily to the partner that they're with. That's a game breaker right there. I mean, forget it. And I think that it's possible to be connected and safe around sexuality even when you're having tumult in the relationship. I think it's possible, but you have to have communication. That's the intimacy thing we were talking about, absolutely essential. And then relieved of duties. So I keep telling these guys, I see lots of couples in my practice, sometimes together, sometimes separately, and I keep telling the guys, look, man, you gotta do the dishes. You know, you really want to have sex? You have to, like, you know, hire someone to come do the dishes, whatever, you know. Get it so that she feels like, you know, I'm not being with you. Instead of taking care of that shit I'm going to have to do tomorrow morning and get up even earlier and lose even more sleep, right? There has to be some sense of relieved of duties for the moment, which is also about making the setting good, right? So many guys can shift into, oh, really? You want to have sex? Okay, I'm ready. You know, whoo, that was fast, right? Not that difficult. Not all men, but a lot of men. And for women, there's it takes a little more separation. So creating a space where, you know, like folding laundry and doing your taxes on the bed, bad idea. Very bad idea, right? You want to train your body that what happens in your bedroom is sleep, really important, and sex. Right? Because otherwise the mind will go to what you were last doing there. We're just not that evolved. We're just like Pavlov's dog, right? We get used to doing whatever we're doing. So creating a sanctuary for that and then having, you know, making time for it. And I know that making dates for sex doesn't sound very sexy, but it works for a lot of people. It really does. And people are so busy these days and so overworked that it's hard to get to it. I have a date soon as we're done here, as a matter of fact. Not necessarily for sex, but, you know, with my husband. Now I'm blushing. But for connection, right? For intimacy. Because it's so important. And I would not be married if I didn't have date night, I swear to God. It seems like a little thing. It's not little. It's huge. Really important. Okay. Libido and sex drive. Hormones play a big part here. So here's the little doctor advertisement. So if you're a male and you are, gosh, getting into your 40s and maybe in your 50s and maybe in your 60s and God, where did my sex drive go? Like, really, I could care less? Rodney Dangerfield has this awesome cartoon that says something like, I used to I used to love sex. I had a mirror above my bed, and now I could care less. I installed a mirror above my kitchen table. You know, that like eating to him was now much more exciting than having sex, right? Some men have testopause more and more these days because we have estrogens in our toxins in the environment, in plastics, in pesticides, petroleum products. And we can actually get, a lot of men have low testosterone. So this is something I look at a lot. It has profound effects on libido for guys. It also has effects on your bone mass and your cholesterol and your heart. It's not good for men to be without testosterone. Testosterone is partly what makes men men, and we like that. So I do look at testosterone levels in men who are and it causes depression too. So certainly something to think about in guys. There was a question, yes?
Is that something that can be reversed without medicine? I mean, let's say we get rid of the plastics and make that effort. Does it naturally come back, or is it something that needs to be replaced?
Great question. Can you reverse it without medication? So the way you would do that is exercise more, build muscle mass, lose fat, which produces estrogen and drowns out the testosterone effect. Stop drinking so much beer. Belly fat. I love beer, don't get me wrong. Totally love beer. I'm an advocate, but you know, if you're getting a ton of belly fat, it will drown out your testosterone, and alcohol also does the same thing. So there are natural things we can do. There are lots of herbs that I use, both to block the estrogen effect and to enhance the testosterone effect. So yes, you can do things about it besides take testosterone. And, you know, there's lots of ways to take testosterone too. Speaking of which, for women, it looks like we at least have some people in my age group here. So perimenopause has this profound effect on libido for lots of women, and menopause, which is that if all is going well, sex is still fun. You could just really give a shit whether you have it or not. And that's change. That's really a change. And it's really hard for guys because that does not happen to them. They go, oh my God, she doesn't want, what happened? You know, now I must be ugly, right? I must suck because my sex drive is about how my partner looks, so she must think that about me. Not necessarily so. And in lesbian couples, this is a really big deal because now nobody gives a shit if they have sex, right? So this is a big deal. And a couple of things. One is that I've almost never, and one of the things I say is, well, look, why don't you just try having sex, right? Because sex is healthy, it's good for intimacy, it makes you a much better person. It's much better to be kind, patient, loving when you've actually been intimate with someone recently. So it's good for your partnership. So sometimes you have to just decide to have sex. Unless you really, really don't want to. Most people are like, oh, I'm glad I did that. That was fun. Oh, I forgot how fun that was, right? Oh, I forgot about that. Wow, imagine that. Sex is fun. So choosing to have sex becomes important, especially for women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. Sometimes after menopause, sex drive comes back for women. Good news. And the reason is that your testosterone, even though it's lower, the estrogen is so much lower that the relative effect is higher, which is why we get chin hair and mustaches and all those really fun male growth patterns, hair growth patterns, but we get our sex drive back. So, you know, it's a trade-off. Libido. And then what I said about the context is hugely important for all women, I swear to God. Rested, connected, and relieved of duties. This is like the secret. For men who are with women or women who are with women, this is the secret to getting your lover back into sex or back into enjoying sex. And we're already kind of coming into sex and getting older. I do a lot of perimenopausal and menopausal hormone evaluation and just general health evaluation because adrenal function, thyroid function, ovarian function, all really matters, and it's kind of erratic, and that can make some women crazy. Now there are amazing women who go through menopause and go, oh, I barely noticed that. I was a little warm. And you just go, wow, you know, that's amazing. Oh, I just stopped having periods and I kind of forgot about it. Cool. And other women, yeah, and other women are like, ah, that? You know, like my life is falling apart. You know, I have all these incredibly smart, capable, professional, working women in my practice, and they come in like, what? Oh my God, you know, I can't function. I don't know what happened. I can't sleep. I'm having horrible hot flashes. I hate everyone. Oh, it's menopause. It's menopause. I'm so sorry. We can fix that. And I do. So we just sort of moderate things for a little while the transition happens and you get spit out of the other side. Okay. Sex and getting older. It is really a myth that people over 50 don't have sex. That's bullshit. They absolutely do. And I gave you two kind of extreme examples earlier. But I have so many older couples in my practice. I have a woman who, she came to see me because her crazy husband decided after she had a baby 25 years earlier that she wasn't attractive anymore. I was like, and you stayed with him? Really? He stopped having sex with her for 25 years. He had sex with other people. And then she decided, damn it, she deserved to have a sex drive. So she started reading my book. She came to see me in my office. We got her using a topical estrogen cream so that, because she's now 60, so that she could actually be lubricated again. She wanted to do the jade egg exercise, which is this very cool Taoist exercise that increases blood flow to the vagina and strengthens the PC muscle and makes orgasm more fun. So we finally got her to the point that she could do that. She was really excited about it. And now she's having sex for the first time in 30 years at 60, and it's the best sex she's ever had in her life. And that is absolutely possible. I have another patient who hadn't been in a relationship for 15 years, came to see me. The only thing you really need is sometimes, if you're continually having sex, it's not a problem, but if you're a woman who doesn't have sex for a while, you really do regain your virginity. So sorry, but the tissues, you know, kind of get smaller again. The tissues get a little more tender and less lubricated, and so a little bit of topical estrogen can help, both with lubrication and with sensitivity, and it's not hormone replacement therapy, doesn't put you at risk for anything. And then, you know, this woman who hadn't had sex for 15 years again, she said, oh my God, and now I'm female ejaculating. Your next question is going to be, what the hell is that? And it's some women, many women probably, though they don't acknowledge it, when they have an orgasm, there's actually a fluid ejaculation. It is not urine. It has a lot of sugar content. It comes from the glands that surround the urethra. And it can be part of pleasure for lots of women when they're really, really surrendered and letting go. And this woman was so excited, 62 I think, having ecstatic sex. It's great. So that is absolutely possible. And does it mean that you need to have sex 3 times a day like my 80-year-old couple? Absolutely not. You don't have to do that. You know, that's way above the national average. But you can if you want to. That's the point. And just in case you're wondering, the national average for a married couple is twice a week. I had another patient at 60 go, I'm not having sex with my husband enough. I was like, well, okay, how long are you after you 3 times a week, and I can never feel libido. I was like, well, you know, it's a lot, you know, it's okay. No wonder you're never getting to feel your libido because you're having sex before you feel it. Anyway, I think the frequency that works is the one that works for you. There's no magic number.